Imagine a world where scent was more than beauty, where fragrance was a prayer, a medicine, a symbol of royalty, and even a bridge between the human and the divine. Perfume has shaped cultures, seduced empires, and carried stories across thousands of years. Today, we think of perfume as something luxurious, glamorous, even modern, but its roots stretch far deeper than any designer bottle on a shelf. Welcome to the secret story of perfume, from ancient rituals to modern luxury. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss a journey through history, mystery, and the hidden stories behind everyday wonders. From the earliest breaths of human civilization, long before written language took its familiar form, and long before empires carved their names into stone, scent was already shaping the human experience. The ancient world was alive with fragrance, sometimes subtle, sometimes overwhelming, always meaningful. In Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley, perfume emerged not merely as something pleasant, but as something sacred, powerful, and deeply woven into everyday life. To explore the first perfumes is to walk into a world where every aroma had a purpose, every ingredient carried a story, and every ritual was infused with the belief that scent connected the human soul to forces beyond understanding. In the river-washed lands of ancient Egypt, the story of perfume begins beneath the blazing sun and among the fields of flowers grown along the fertile Nile. Egyptians believed scent was the sweat of the gods, a divine essence drifting from the realm of immortality to the world of the living. To wear fragrance was not simply to smell pleasant, it was to participate in something holy. Priests performed daily rituals in which scented oils and incense played a central role. Temples housed perfumed resins, stacked in jars of alabaster and clay, preserved like treasure. Every morning, priests would wash statues of the gods, anoint them with oils infused with lotus, myrrh, cinnamon, and the sweet resin of the acacia tree. As the cool oil touched stone, the air filled with a warmth that felt like the breath of the divine. Scent became a language, one that spoke to gods, spirits, and ancestors more clearly than words ever could. Perfume also served a deep spiritual purpose in Egyptian life and death. The process of mummification was rich with fragrant materials, not only for preservation, but also for symbolic protection. Seeds are cedarwood, juniper, pine resin, and aromatic herbs soaked into the linens that wrap the dead, allowing the body to cross into the afterlife with a purified presence. Oils like atifai, a famous Egyptian blend known for its calming, almost hypnotic aroma, were burned at night to soothe the soul and invite pleasant dreams. Kifi was more than a perfume. It was a cure, a ritual, a form of meditation, and a cultural treasure whose recipe survived thousands of years. Egyptian perfumers became masters of blending, heating, and distilling, experimenting with new methods to extract essences from plants. Though their tools were simple, their results were complex enough to influence perfume making for millennia. While Egypt embraced perfume as a bridge between the human and the divine, the lands of Mesopotamia approached fragrance with their own character, shaped by bustling cities, complex trade networks, and an unending search for meaning in a world of gods and kings. The earliest known chemist in recorded history, a woman named Taputi Balatkilam, lived in Mesopotamia around 1200 BCE. Her existence is more than a historical curiosity. It proves that perfume was already a sophisticated craft requiring deep knowledge of ingredients, boiling points, solvents, and proportions. Clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform describe her processes, documenting how she distilled flowers, myrrh, and oils. Using water and alcohol long before distillation became a common technique elsewhere. Taputi refined scents layer by layer, filtering them over and over to produce something exceptionally pure, setting standards that future perfumers would try to imitate. Mesopotamia's cities, Babylon, and Nineveh, were places where markets overflowed with spices, herbs, and exotic materials brought by caravans from distant lands. Perfume became part of everyday life for both the elite and the ordinary, though the richest families enjoyed the rarest blends. Women wore scented oils on their hair and skin. Kings burned incense to show their wealth and power. Religious ceremonies involved resins that curled upward in fragrant smoke, while priests chanted before towering statues of gods like Marduk and Ishtar. Temples stored jars of perfumed oils that symbolized purification and respect. Even the household gods, small clay figurines, were sometimes anointed with scented balms, protecting the family and blessing the home. Perfume also played an important role in Mesopotamian medicine. Scented salves cured aches, soothed wounds, and protected against disease. Cedar oil, in particular, was valued for cleansing and used in rituals meant to banish evil spirits, believed to cause illness. So closely were scent and healing linked that doctors often acted as both physicians and perfumers, mixing herbs and resins to make treatments that smelled as comforting as they were medicinal. To live in ancient Mesopotamia was to live in a world where scent floated constantly in the air, sometimes sweet, sometimes harsh, always purposeful. Far to the east, in the lush and river-fed lands of the Indus Valley, fragrance took on yet another unique identity. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were advanced urban centers, equipped with paved streets, complex drainage systems, and thriving craft industries. Among the artifacts uncovered by archaeologists were small containers made of stone and clay that likely held perfumes or aromatic oils. Although the Indus script remains undeciphered, the objects and residues found in the region reveal a civilization deeply engaged with the art of scent. The Indus Valley people used perfumes in their daily rituals, beauty practices, and possibly in their spiritual ceremonies. They distilled essential oils from flowers, herbs, and spices, making use of the rich botanical landscape of ancient India. Jasmine, sandalwood, vetiver, patchouli, and rose were among the plants available to them, ingredients that would later become iconic in Indian perfumery. The earliest forms of attar, a type of distilled perfume, may have originated in this era, where flowers were slowly heated with water, and the rising vapor condensed into fragrant oils. Though the process would later be perfected by Indian perfumers during the Mughal period, its roots stretch back to the resourceful people of the Indus Valley who understood the value of scent as both luxury and medicine. One of the unique aspects of the Indus Valley's approach to fragrance was its emphasis on natural freshness and cooling properties. In the intense heat of the region, people applied scented pastes made of sandalwood and herbs to keep the body cool. Homes were often sprinkled with aromatic water, and woven mats made from vetiver grass released a gentle, earthy scent when dampened. Bathing rituals also involved fragrant oils, making daily hygiene a sensory experience. Even without written records, the objects and traces left behind suggest a culture that embraced fragrance as an essential part of life. These three civilizations, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley, developed perfume independently, yet their stories intertwine through trade, migration, and the shared human desire for beauty and meaning. Aromatic materials traveled from one region to another along early trade routes. The myrrh of Arabia reached Egypt, the cedar of Lebanon reached Mesopotamia, the spices of India found their way to distant lands. Perfume became an exchange of culture as well as goods. A jar of resin or vial of oil carried within it the memories of its homeland, the soil, the climate, the craftsmanship, and the beliefs of the people who made it. The act of creating perfume in the ancient world required patience and intuition. Fragrant ingredients were pounded with stones until they became powder, then mixed with oils extracted from olives, almonds, or animal fats. Resins melted slowly over fires, releasing deep, rich scents. Flowers were soaked repeatedly until their essence transferred into the oil. Each blend represented a series of delicate decisions: which ingredient to use, how long to heat it, how much to mix. Perfume making was both art and science, a craft as intimate as cooking and as mysterious as alchemy. Many perfumers guarded their recipes carefully, passing them down through families or temple lineages. Perfume served social purposes as well. In Egypt, ointments and oils were worn during banquets to cool the body and release pleasant aromas. Guests sometimes wore perfumed cones on their heads which melted slowly, filling the air with scent. In Mesopotamia, Fragrances symbolize status, with the wealthy wearing the most complex blends. In the Indus Valley, scented preparations enhanced bathing rituals and personal cleanliness. These civilizations understood that scent could influence mood, attract others, and create an atmosphere of comfort or reverence. The spiritual role of perfume cannot be overstated. In every one of these ancient societies, fragrance was a form of communication with unseen forces. Burned incense carried prayers upward. Anointing oils protected the soul. Fragrant smoke purified sacred spaces. To the ancient mind, the invisible nature of scent made it a perfect symbol of divine presence, something felt not seen, something powerful yet intangible. Perfume was a reminder that the world was filled with energies and mysteries beyond the reach of the human eye. The legacy of these early civilizations shaped the entire history of perfumery. The Egyptians perfected extraction and blending. The Mesopotamians documented distillation and chemistry. The Indus Valley people developed cooling attars and botanical techniques that would influence South Asian fragrance traditions for thousands of years. Their combined knowledge formed the roots of the perfume industry, long before Europe or the Middle East entered the story. The scents they created, rich, resinous, floral, earthy, still echo in modern perfumery. Today, when we inhale a perfume with notes of jasmine, sandalwood, myrrh, or rose, we are breathing memories of ancient cities, temples, gardens, and rituals. The birth of scent in these early civilizations was not merely about making something pleasant to smell. It was about defining beauty, honoring the divine, connecting to nature, and finding meaning in the invisible. Perfume was a tool, a symbol, a comfort, and an art. And from the moment humans realized that flowers, resins, and oils could be transformed into something magical, the story of fragrance became inseparable from the story of humanity itself. Each drop of ancient perfume carried a message from the past. That scent has the power to change not only how we smell, but how we feel, how we remember, and how we understand our place in the world. From the earliest dawn of human society, long before the glint of steel, before cities of marble and gold, before written scrolls or laws, there was scent. Not a trivial adornment, but something fundamental. Fragrance of worship, of burial, of intimacy, of health. In the fertile plains of the Nile, along the great rivers of Mesopotamia between the Euphrates and Tigris, and in the ancient communities of the Indus, peoples who built the foundations of civilization, humans discovered that flowers, resins, woods, herbs, and oils could be transformed into something magical. Perfume. This was not simply about smelling pleasant. It was about touching the divine, comforting the dead, preserving the body, marking status, and connecting distant lands through trade routes scented with myrrh, lotus, cedar, and fragrant resins. In ancient Egypt, the sun-baked land by the Nile, perfume had a sacred status. Egyptians believed that fragrance was more than aroma. It was divine essence, a manifestation of the gods themselves. Priests served the gods with incense and scented oils, believing that fragrant smoke and perfumed unguents carried prayers upward and blessed the temple spaces. The ritual burning of resins and woods was more than perfuming a space. It was a bridge between mortal and immortal, between earth and the divine. Archaeologists have found perfume vessels, ointment jars, and alabaster containers in tombs and pyramids. Silent evidence of how much value was placed on scent, even in death. The fact that some of these ancient perfumes still retain a trace of aroma thousands of years later speaks to the sophistication of their preparation. The Perfume Society, one of the most revered fragrances from antiquity, known to the Egyptians and admired by succeeding civilizations. Coffee. This complex blend combined resins, woods, herbs, wine, honey, and more, producing a sweet, woody, and enveloping aroma. In temples, it was burned at dusk in honor of the sun god. In households, it served as incense, and in burial rites, it purified the air and sanctified the journey into afterlife. Such perfumes did not emerge fully formed. The Egyptians developed methods of extraction, maceration, pressing, and infusion long before modern distillation. They carefully pressed flowers like lotus and lilies, steeped herbs and resins into fixed oils or fats, such as Bolano's oil, a neutral, non-rancid oil pressed from seeds of a tree native to the region, so the aromatic compounds would permeate the base oil without spoiling over time. Some oils were used to moisturize skin in arid climates. Others were part of hygiene routines, and sacred ointments were used in rites of healing and burial. Egypt's perfumed culture was not isolated. Through trade networks reaching into Arabia, the Horn of Africa, the ancient now land of Punt, and beyond, Egyptians imported exotic resins, spices and aromatics, frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, resins from distant lands, materials precious enough to be considered worth their weight in gold. These imports enriched local perfume traditions, creating increasingly complex and luxurious scents reserved for the elite, for temples, and for burial of the revered dead. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, among the cities of Babylon, Mary, and Nineveh, perfume making was not less advanced. In many ways, it pioneered techniques that would influence perfumery for millennia. There lived a woman whose name survives on ancient clay tablets, Tapeti Belatkalam. Dated around 1200 BCE, she is widely regarded as the world's first recorded chemist and perfumer. The tablets describe her distilling flowers, oil, a reed called calamus, resins like myrrh and balsam, and other botanicals, sometimes mixing with water or other solvents, then filtering and distilling repeatedly to achieve a refined, stable perfume. Tapeti's work shows that the art of perfume in Mesopotamia was more than ritual or luxury. It was science. Her creation of a still, a device to extract volatile aromatic compounds, marks a turning point from simple macerations and incense burning to early chemistry. Perfumed oils and balms were used throughout Mesopotamian life, in religious rituals, in royal courts, and as part of everyday grooming and medicine. Cuneiform tablets reference scented oils used in royal ceremonies, personal body care, and even therapeutic ointments. Much like in Egypt, perfumes in Mesopotamia occupied a dual realm, both sacred and secular. They sanctified temple spaces, honored deities, anointed statues, and soothed the souls of the faithful. They also served to mark status, to cleanse the body, and to ward off disease, in a time when aroma, health, and spirituality were deeply interwoven. While Egyptian and Mesopotamian traditions are well documented through hieroglyphics and cuneiform tablets, another cradle of scent lay further east. The ancient communities of the Indus Valley civilization, flourishing between 3,300 and 1,300 BCE across parts of modern-day Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan. Here, too, archaeological discoveries hint at a culture that valued fragrance. Small containers, some made of clay or stone, likely held oils, balms, or perfumes. A terracotta distillation apparatus was unearthed in the ruins of an ancient site, carbon dated to around 3000 BCE, suggesting that people in the Indus Valley had begun experimenting with extraction and distillation of scents long before many other societies. The landscape around the Indus Basin was rich in plants suitable for fragrance. Jasmine, sandalwood, vetiver, patchouli, rose, and other aromatic herbs and woods. These plants, together with spices and resins traded via early caravans, provided raw materials for perfumery. It is likely that the people of the Indus Valley developed early forms of attar, scented oils distilled from botanicals, paving the way for later perfume traditions in South Asia. In their hot climate, fragrances were not just indulgences. They were practical. People applied scented pastes and oils to the skin to cool down. They used aromatic water to refresh homes and living spaces, and they perfumed their bodies for hygiene as well as beauty. Bathing rituals, personal grooming, and daily life all carried fragrance. Even without written records from the Indus script, still undeciphered, the material remains. Jars, residues, distillation setups speak for themselves. Scent was deeply embedded in daily life. Trade played a major role in connecting these early perfume cultures. Exotic resins from Arabia and the Horn of Africa, woods and spices from South Asia, oils from local plants. These materials traveled long distances, carried by caravans, merchants, traders, and pilgrims. As goods moved, so did ideas, techniques for extraction, blending, storage, and ritual use. Perfume became a language of exchange, not only of goods but of culture, spirituality, and identity. The process of crafting perfume in these early civilizations was laborious and delicate. Petals or herbs might be crushed or pounded under stone, resins heated gently to release aromatic oils, or botanicals soaked in fixed oils or animal fats over days or weeks. Oils like bolanos, odorless carriers, were prized because they would accept volatile scent compounds without spoiling quickly. In some regions, scents were burned. Resins and woods ignited to release fragrant smoke that filled temples and homes, purifying spaces and elevating the spirit. Perfume was deeply entwined with spirituality, healing, death, and society. In Egypt, for instance, the famous kifi was more than a pleasant aroma. It was used as incense, as medicine, even as a drink in certain ritual contexts, believed to ease anxiety, induce pleasant dreams, or relieve respiratory ailments. The process of mummification often included fragrant balms and oils, so that the deceased might ascend into the afterlife purified and blessed. The perfume society in Mesopotamia, perfumes and scented oils also played roles in medicinal recipes, in healing rituals, and in daily hygiene. Herbal and aromatic salves could soothe wounds, reduce pain, or drive away ailments, a tradition that connected scent with health long before modern pharmacology. Even in everyday life, fragrance mattered. In Egypt, cones of scented wax were placed on the heads of men and women. As the day passed and the wax melted slowly, it released a gentle cloud of scent, perfuming their hair, skin, and environment. Oils were used not just for beauty, but as sun protection and skin nourishment in harsh desert climates. Such practices show that ancient people understood not only the spiritual or symbolic power of scent, they also understood its physical benefits. As time passed and cultures mingled, the perfume traditions of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley did not vanish. They evolved, merged, and spread. People migrating, conquering armies, traders, priests, and pilgrims carried perfumed oils and aromatic knowledge across continents. The base techniques of extraction, oil infusion, and incense burning formed the foundation for later perfumery traditions in Greece, Rome, Persia, the Arab world, and ultimately Europe. When we reflect on modern perfume bottles, those shimmering flacons of eau de parfum and eau de toilette marketed as luxury and fashion, it is easy to forget that their ancestors were carved alabaster jars, clay vessels, and small oil that the first to know wasn't a French couturier, but a Mesopotamian woman recording her recipe on a clay tablet, that the scent of lotus, lotus water, myrrh, frankincense, cedar, rose, sandalwood, resins, herbs, and wine once filled temples, palaces, humble homes, and funeral chambers. That perfume began not on fashion runways, but in the temples of gods and the homes of the faithful, and in the hands of early chemists who thought of scent as alchemy. To imagine walking through ancient Memphis on the banks of the Nile, a morning breeze carrying the scent of lotus blossoms and distant incense, priests entering temples carrying burners of burning resins, women applying oils to their skin, craftsmen grinding herbs with stone pestles, is to glimpse a world where scent was sacred, ordinary, magic. To picture Mesopotamian courtiers in Babylon applying fragrant oils before a royal banquet, or a perfumer like Tapoti distilling her finest fragrances, is to realize that the perfume we wear today is rooted in rituals, reverence, and early science. To think of traders carrying jars of aromatic resins from distant lands, linking Africa, Arabia, India, and the Fertile Crescent, is to understand that perfume helped connect far-flung cultures in a shared love of scent. Even today, many of those base ingredients remain valued. Myrrh, frankincense, rose, sandalwood, cedar, spices, resins, and the tradition of blending, layering, infusing, and distilling echoes in modern perfumery. The past lives on not only in ancient ruins and dusty tablets, it lives in every waft of fragrance that stirs memory. longing, cultural identity, or spiritual reflection. When we spray a modern perfume, floral, woody, musky, resinous, spicy, we are inhaling the refined wisdom of early perfumers, the hands of temple priests, the wandering traders, the craftsmen grinding herbs with stone, the chemists like Tapati distilling oils with water and resins, the women applying scented oils under the hot sun of the Indus plains. The people applying incense in temples of stone, the mourners anointing the dead with sacred oils, the pilgrims carrying precious vials across deserts and seas. Those early perfumes, humble oils, resins, herbs, were imperfect by modern standards, less long-lasting, less complex in structure, sometimes harsh, sometimes subtle. But they were human, rooted in place, belief, necessity, and craft. They carried the smell of earth, of geography, of seasons. They carried the memory of climates and cultures, of rituals and economies, of life and death. In that sense, the birth of perfume in ancient civilizations was not a fashion statement. It was a revolution. A revolution of the senses, of how humans perceived, remembered, prayed, healed, and connected. It was the moment when humans realized that scent could carry meaning, that a smell could whisper prayers to gods, could comfort the dying, could mark status, could evoke longing, could heal, could travel across continents. And that revolution continues to this very day. Every time someone holds a fragrance bottle to their wrist and inhales, they partake in a legacy, thousands of years old. A legacy born on the banks of the Nile, in the courts of Babylon, along the riverbanks of the Indus, carried in clay jars, alabaster vials, distillation pots, incense burners, and in human memory. So next time you catch a whiff of jasmine or sandalwood, of cedar or myrrh, pause and remember. You are not just smelling a scent. You are inhaling history. Priests believed that the gods drew near when they sensed these fragrances, responding with protection, prosperity, or favor. In the Indus Valley, archaeologists have uncovered elaborate incense burners and vessels stained with traces of perfumed oils, indicating that even there, the connection between fragrance and divinity ran deep. Though the exact religious systems of the Indus Valley remain partly unknown, the presence of these aromatic tools suggests rituals where scent played a central role, perhaps to invoke ancestral spirits or align worshippers with cosmic rhythms. The rising smoke could have symbolized the journey of the soul or served as a beacon guiding deities to the ritual site. What is clear is that across cultures, fragrance acted as a universal spiritual code, wordless, weightless, yet powerful enough to carry prayers beyond the physical world. Fui. This spiritual function of scent was not limited to grand temples or priestly rites. In many cultures, domestic rituals also relied on fragrant offerings. A family might burn incense to honor household gods, seeking protection or gratitude. A bride might be anointed with scented oils, not only to smell beautiful, but to invoke blessings from the divine. Farmer might burn aromatic herbs at the edge of a field to request good harvests or drive away unseen forces. The fragrance that drifted into the air became a gesture of participation in the cosmic order. Even the most ordinary people believed that the gods were always listening, especially when the message was delivered through scent. Ancient priests also understood scent as transformative. They believed it could bridge the gap between the mundane and the sacred, turning ordinary spaces into holy ground. When incense filled a temple, it did more than mask earthly smells. It created a sensory boundary between the human and the divine. Stepping into such a space meant entering a world where every breath was intentional, where the invisible became palpable. The very air seemed charged with meaning. Priests described this transformation as a kind of awakening, the moment when the world opened and divine attention became present. Scent was the switch that turned this transformation on, the sacred spark that ignited the ritual. Fragrance also became a tool for reading the will of the gods. Priests observed how incense burned, whether the smoke rose straight, drifted sideways, split into multiple streams, or dissipated quickly. Each pattern, they believed, revealed divine messages. A steady upward rise might indicate approval, while a wavering stream might suggest uncertainty or displeasure. Thus, Scent did not only send messages, it delivered them back. It became an oracular medium, its movements interpreted with as much seriousness as omens in the sky or patterns in the stars. Perfume's association with divine communication extended into funerary practices. Death, for ancient civilizations, was not an ending, but a transition, a journey in which scent played a guiding role. Bodies were anointed with fragrant oils to purify the spirit and prepare it for passage into the afterlife. Egyptians used vast quantities of myrrh, cinnamon, and lotus oils in mummification, believing that these substances protected the soul, communicated respect to the gods of the underworld, and provided a kind of aromatic passport across the realms. The dead, enveloped in sacred fragrance, were thought to be more easily recognized and received by the divine. In this way, perfume became a signal fire in the darkness, a luminous guide in scent rather than light. There was also a belief that fragrance could elevate human consciousness. Priests inhaled scented fumes during rituals to reach heightened states of awareness, believing that certain aromas opened pathways between earthly senses and divine perception. Some scents induced calm, others clarity, others reverence. Ritual specialists learned which combinations produced particular states of mind and used them to engage more deeply with the spiritual world. Through this, fragrance became not only a message to the gods, but a tool for attuning the human soul, a harmonizer that enabled more profound communication. In these altered states, priests believed they could hear the divine more clearly and interpret celestial will more accurately. The philosophical significance of fragrance extended beyond ritual. Many ancient cultures believed that the soul itself possessed a scent, invisible and delicate, reflecting its purity or corruption. A virtuous soul was said to emit an aroma pleasant to the gods, while a troubled or tainted soul carried a scent of disorder. Perfume, therefore, played a symbolic role, an external expression of internal harmony. When a person anointed themselves with fragrance, they were not merely adorning their body, but aligning their spirit with ideals cherished by the divine. Scent became a moral expression, a silent prayer that the soul might be pleasing to higher powers. This belief influenced political power as well. Kings and queens often underwent coronation rituals involving copious amounts of perfume, meant to signal their bond with the divine. Their fragrance symbolized divine approval, legitimizing their rule. When rulers entered temples, the air filled with ceremonial scent, marking them as individuals chosen or blessed by the gods. The fragrance surrounding them was not perfume. It was authority, divinely sanctioned and undeniably potent. Across the ancient world, the making of perfume itself became an act of devotion. Perfumers were often considered spiritual artisans, creating formulas with an almost alchemical reverence. They blended resins, woods, flowers, and oils with ritual purity, believing that the ingredients carried divine properties. Each substance had a symbolic meaning: frankincense for illumination, myrrh for protection, cedar for strength, lotus for rebirth. When these were combined, the perfume became a sacred text written in aroma rather than words. To craft such fragrances was to participate in divine creation, shaping a medium through which gods and humans could speak. Even the myths reinforced this sacred relationship. In many traditions, gods were described as possessing divine scents that mortals could recognize but never replicate. The presence of a deity was often announced not by thunder or light, but by fragrance: a sudden bloom of lotus, a gust of sweet myrrh, a warm whisper of sandalwood drifting across a desert breeze. These stories taught people that scent was not just symbolic of the divine, but intrinsic to it. To perceive fragrance was to perceive closeness to the divine realm. Over time, as civilizations expanded and cultures intermingled, the belief in perfume as divine communication evolved but never vanished. Rituals adapted, new ingredients emerged, and methods of burning or anointing changed. But the core idea persisted: fragrance could connect worlds. Even today, remnants of these ancient beliefs survive in religious practices across the globe. Incense still rises in temples, churches, and shrines. Oils are still used in blessings, healings, and rites of passage. Candles scented with sacred herbs burn during meditations and prayers. Without realizing it, people continue to use fragrance as a bridge between the earthly and the spiritual, honoring a tradition thousands of years old. The ancient priests may not have understood chemistry in the modern sense, but they understood something deeper, that humans long for connection with forces greater than themselves, and that this longing finds a natural expression through scent. Perfume, fleeting, delicate, impossible to touch yet impossible to ignore, mirrors the very nature of the divine, present but unseen, powerful but intangible. It lingers in memory, transforms spaces, and evokes emotions that defy language. In this way, fragrance remains one of the most ancient and enduring forms of spiritual expression. Thus, the belief that perfume could communicate with the gods was not mere superstition, but a profound poetic insight into the nature of existence. Through scent, ancient priests crafted a universal language, one that transcended words, cultures, and eras. It was a language born of fire, carried by air, shaped by devotion, and preserved in the collective memory of humanity. And even now, when a single tendril of incense rises into the quiet air of a ritual space, it echoes the same hope that resonated thousands of years ago, that the gods are listening, and that through fragrance, the human soul can still speak. The priests believed that the act of burning incense or offering perfumed oils was not simply a ritual adornment. It was a direct conversation with the divine. In the shadowy sanctuaries of ancient temples, long before sunlight pierced the inner sanctum, the first breath of incense would signal the start of the sacred dialogue. As the first flicker of flame touched the resin, the room would hold its breath. A thin spiral of smoke would rise, slow and deliberate, like a messenger ascending. To the human eye, it might have seemed indistinct, but to the priests it was alive, carrying prayers, hopes, and respect upward, laden with both human longing and sacred intention. The smell changed as it warmed and spread, shifting from resinous heaviness to a light incense-sweet veil, a transformation that mirrored the transformation of mortal sacrifice into divine offering. In those moments, it was believed the gods inhaled the fragrance. The smoke was the breath of mortals, rising steadily. The incense, the physical form of devotion. The gods, eternally unseen, were understood to dwell somewhere between air and ether, formless, hearing not voices but the subtle language of aroma. When the smoke curled upward, dissipating into the temple's domes and shafts, it was the invisible form of worship, the unsung hymn that carried human presence into divine realms. Temples themselves were built to accommodate this sacred communication. In the grand complexes of ancient Egypt, for example, special chambers, often described by modern scholars as incense laboratories, were devoted entirely to the preparation of perfumed resins, oils, and incense blends for temple use. Stone mortars, copper strainers, storage vessels, and ritual ovens formed the toolkit of these sacred workshops. Priests would grind resins and herbs by hand, soak them in carrier oils or wine, and prepare them over several days, sometimes weeks, in precise sequences according to calendar days, festival timings, and the alignment of stars. The centerpiece of all these sacred scents was often the legendary incense known as kifi, sometimes called a cap. This complex blend, whose ingredients could number a dozen or more, combined resins like myrrh and frankincense with beeswax or balsam, wine or honey, herbs, woods, and aromatic reeds. When burned at dusk in temple sanctuaries, kifi smoke was believed to recreate the aroma of the divine realm, to purify the space, and invite the presence of gods, comforting the living and honoring the dead. These rituals were more than tradition. In inscriptions and temple reliefs, offering incense was often described not as a mere gift, but as the fragrance of the gods, a substance that the divine inhaled, sustained by scent. Some gods were even believed to have a personal preference for certain scents. For example, in Egyptian belief, a deity might favor the lotus-derived oils for their purity and lightness, while another might delight in the warmth of resin or wood. But the power of fragrance as divine communication was not confined to Egypt. In the great cities of ancient Mesopotamia, cities like Babylon, Ashur, Mary, priests and perfumers exercised a similar belief in the sacred nature of scent. Among them was Tapiti Balakalam, widely regarded as the first known chemist in human history and the earliest recorded perfumer, active around 1200 BCE. On clay tablets written in cuneiform, she documented the process of blending flowers, oils, aromatic resins, and herbs, sometimes mixing with water or alcohol, then filtering and distilling multiple times to create refined perfume oils. This early form of distillation and aroma extraction indicates that Mesopotamian perfumers were not only spiritual artisans but proto-scientists. Their work blurred the lines between devotion, medicine, and chemistry. The oils and scents they created served multiple purposes: ritual offerings, personal adornment, and perhaps even early medical or therapeutic uses. For them, perfume making was sacred alchemy, transforming the physical, earthly matter of plants into invisible spirit-filled essence. When such oils were burned or offered, the smoke was believed to carry layered meaning: reverence, plea, purification, and communion with the divine. In a time when the gods seldom manifested in visible form, fragrance offered a tangible sign of their presence. The priest would interpret the rising smoke, the way it curled or split, its strength or faintness as omens, signs from the gods about their favor or displeasure. The incense burner became a medium not just of scent, but of oracular communication. Beyond temples, perfume and incense also played a crucial role in funeral rites and in the journey of the soul after death. In ancient Egypt, for instance, the dead were anointed with fragrant oils, resins, and balms during mummification and burial. The belief was that scent purified the body and spirit, making the passage into the afterlife possible, and that the gods, or the gods of the underworld, would recognize the soul by this divine aroma, welcoming it with acceptance. In many rituals, incense was also used to sanctify sacred objects. Statues, altars, ritual vessels, tombs, even sacred garments. The scent rendered them alive in spiritual terms, making them fit for divine interaction. Ancient inscriptions refer to the notion of gods of breathing on the incense, that the divine presence resided where the scent lingered. Even beyond official religious structures, in domestic spaces and rural shrines, fragrance was central to daily spiritual practice. Families burned incense before small household shrines to honor household gods or ancestors. They anointed newborns, invoked blessings over crops or flocks, or used aromatic oils in rites of passage like birth, marriage, or mourning. The rising smoke became a subtle, constant conversation with cosmic powers, a thread weaving human life to the divine tapestry. The sensory effect of scent also played a role in shaping consciousness. Priests and worshippers inhaled incense and oils to enter altered states of calm, clarity, awe, or receptivity. These mental shifts fostered experiences that felt transcendent, that dissolved ordinary concerns and opened the door to what they perceived as contact with higher realities. Perfume was not just a gift to gods, it was a spiritual amplifier, a means to heighten human sensitivity to the sacred. Over centuries, as empires fell and rose, as cultures mingled, and as trade routes stretched from the Nile to Mesopotamia and beyond, the sacred perfume tradition persisted, evolving, adapting, but never losing its core meaning. The knowledge of incense recipes, perfume-making techniques, and ritual use spread widely. The oils, woods, resins, flowers, and herbs that once belonged to remote regions became shared heritage. To inhale frankincense in a distant land was to draw upon the prayers of priests, thousands of years old. Even today, echoes of those ancient beliefs remain. In many religious traditions around the world, in churches, mosques, temples, monasteries, incense is still burned during worship. Oils are still used in ceremonial anointings. Fragrance continues to symbolize purity, sanctity, and connection to something beyond material existence. Though modern science and language have largely replaced ancient theology, the same human longing persists: to reach beyond the physical, to touch the sacred, to feel connected through something intangible, but deeply real. If we close our eyes now, inhale slowly, we might imagine standing in a temple courtyard at dusk, the sky turning violet as torches flicker. A priest lifts a censer. First tendrils of smoke drift upward, twisting and thin. The scent is warm, resinous, calming, myrrh and cedar, with a sweet undercurrent of honey and herbs. In that moment, time slows. The heart hushes. The world shrinks until all that exists is the breath, the smoke, the scent, and the quiet knowledge that someone, somewhere beyond our sight, is listening. This is the power of perfume as divine communication. A bridge built of fragrance, a language spoken by smoke, a prayer carried by air. Through the ages, through civilizations long gone and long changed, that silent conversation has endured. Not in tablets or stones, but in the senses. Every time incense rises, every time oil is poured, every time someone closes their eyes and breathes in a sacred scent, the ancient ritual is renewed. The gods perhaps inhale once more, and the human soul speaks in the oldest language there is. From the moment ancient peoples discovered that plants could be transformed into fragrant treasures, a vast network of roads, rivers, and sea routes began to pulse with a new kind of wealth. One that was invisible, delicate, and deeply desired. Spices, resins, and aromatic oils were unlike any other commodity. Grain fed the body, metals powered tools, stone built cities. But fragrance fed the spirit. A single pinch of saffron, a drop of rose oil, a bead of frankincense could command the value of livestock, silver, or cloth. Across continents, this delicate treasure became the unseen engine driving contact between civilizations. Entire economies reshaped themselves around the movement of scent. It spread ideas, stories, religions, and cultural exchanges. Aroma became a global language long before spoken tongues could find mutual understanding. In the ancient world, to smell certain scents was to experience wonder. Imagine standing in a village thousands of years ago, surrounded by everyday smells of earth, wood smoke, animals, and grain. Then suddenly a merchant unpacks a pouch from a faraway land. Pepper that stings the nose with heat, cinnamon sweeter than anything known, myrrh with its warm honey-dark depth. These scents didn't just enter the air, they altered imagination. People began to ask, where does this come from? Who grows it? How far must one travel to bring it here? Curiosity grew into desire, desire into trade, trade into wealth, and wealth into entire networks of caravans and fleets. Over time, the world became more connected, not by metals or weapons, but by the invisible pull of fragrance. The earliest trade routes began modestly. Small groups moved goods from one settlement to the next. But as cities grew, Babylon, Mohenjo-Daro, Memphis, Byblos, aromatic materials became symbols of status. Priests demanded resins for rituals. Kings demanded oils for anointing. Healers demanded spices for remedies. With demand came opportunity. Traders began to travel farther, venturing into deserts, mountains, and jungles, following faint hints of where the plants and trees grew. They learned that frankincense trees thrived in the mountains of Oman and Yemen, that myrrh trees grew in dry valleys near the Red Sea, that cinnamon drifted from lands beyond India, that spices like turmeric, cardamom, and black pepper flourished in the monsoon-soaked soils of the subcontinent. The earliest major network to emerge was the incense route across the Arabian Peninsula. Across blistering dunes and rocky plains, caravans of camels carried bundles of precious sap. The resin hardened into pearls the color of honey or milk, frankincense for purification, myrrh for embalming, benzoin for incense, styrax for medicine. These were not mere commodities, but sacred objects. Each bead of resin represented the cut of a knife into the bark of a tree that took decades to mature. To harvest it required knowledge, care, and a willingness to endure remote cliffs and harsh climates. Merchants traveled slowly, moving from oasis to oasis, guarded by hired fighters or tribal escorts. The journey could take months. Nights were cold, days unbearably hot, and the dangers were many. Bandits, sandstorms, poisonous creatures. But the profits were staggering. One load of frankincense could enrich a merchant for a year. Caravans sometimes stretched for miles, their bells echoing across desert valleys. Cities flourished along these routes, both built not on agriculture or armies, but on aroma. Among them were Petra, the Nabatean stronghold carved into rose-colored cliffs, Gerha along the Persian Gulf, and the fabled kingdom of Saba, often linked to the Queen of Sheba. As incense traveled north, it reached the great civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. There, the value of fragrant materials soared even higher. Egyptian temples could burn thousands of pounds of incense during a major festival. Kings demanded exotic oils for coronations and burials. Perfume workshops near temples became sacred spaces where artisans and priests collaborated. The famous blend known as kiffe, made from myrrh, cassia, juniper, wine, honey, and herbs, could take weeks to prepare. Its recipe was precious, and its scent was believed to bring dreams, calm, and divine favor. Egypt's hunger for aromatics transformed its economy. The pharaohs launched expeditions into the distant land of Punt, believed to be in East Africa or southern Arabia, to secure myrrh and other rare goods. Punt was sometimes called a land of fragrance, and Egyptian art depicts ships returning laden with trees, hoping to grow the precious resin-producing plants in Egyptian soil. Although these attempts rarely succeeded, the desire itself shows the extraordinary value of fragrance. Meanwhile, across the seas, India was becoming the beating heart of the spice trade. Its tropical climate produced cardamom, ginger, turmeric, pepper, cinnamon, and a vast catalog of aromatic roots and barks. Indian traders traveled the Indian Ocean in sturdy ships, navigating monsoon winds with a skill that impressed Greek and Persian visitors. Their spices reached Western Asia, Africa, and even the Mediterranean, long before historians recorded the routes with certainty. Spices from India carried not only aroma but meaning. Pepper, for example, was so precious in Rome that it was stored alongside gold reserves. Cinnamon was used in rituals, medicine, and cosmetics. Even when the true origins of cinnamon remained a secret, jealously guarded by Arabian traders who invented myths of giant birds guarding cinnamon nests, the demand grew relentlessly. Aromas turned into legends and into wealth. To the east, China contributed its own fragrant treasures: camphor from tall white trees, ginger with its fiery aroma, cassia, similar to cinnamon but stronger, and exotic herbs that perfumed tea, medicine, and incense. China's own love for incense was deep-rooted. Buddhist monks burned it during meditation. Scholars used it during poetry gatherings, and homes kept incense boxes carved with dragons or lotus motifs. The Silk Road, which originally flourished on the trade of silk, quickly became a conduit of fragrance as well. Caravans from China brought spices westward, returning with frankincense and other resins prized in temples and palaces. What made fragrances so powerful along these routes was their rarity and the difficulty of obtaining them. A single vial of rose oil required thousands of petals. A pound of frankincense required many trees and careful harvesting. Pepper vines grew only in certain climates, and cinnamon bark required skilled extraction. These were not common goods. They were small, portable, and incredibly valuable. Combination made fragrances the perfect trade commodity. Unlike grain or timber, they were easy to transport, hard to counterfeit, and universally desired. As trade intensified, cultural exchange blossomed. Merchants didn't travel with spices alone. They carried stories, languages, beliefs, and technologies. Markets became places where Egyptians met Nubians, Mesopotamians met Persians, Greeks met Arabians, Indians met Romans. Scented goods transformed not only economies but worldviews. A Roman might never visit India, but he would taste its pepper. An Egyptian priest might never see Arabia, but he would burn its frankincense. A Chinese scholar might never meet a South Asian healer, but he would inhale the camphor they used. Aromas carried identities across continents. Cities along the trade routes became cosmopolitan hubs. Alexandria in Egypt smelled of perfumes from all over the world. Babylon's markets displayed baskets of spices next to bales of textiles. Tyre and Sidon became Phoenician centers of shipping aromatics across the Mediterranean. The Red Sea ports thrived on the incense trade. their harbors echoing with multiple languages. Traders in Arabia developed codes of secrecy to guard knowledge of incense groves. In India, spice-growing regions became wealthy, with large landowners controlling harvests and exports. The movement of aromas also strengthened empires. Rome's desire for luxury goods fueled its involvement in Eastern trade. The empire sent ships from Egypt down the Red Sea toward India, braving storms to obtain cinnamon, pepper, and rare oils. The profits were enormous. Even Pliny the Elder, often skeptical of luxury, complained that Rome was draining its treasury on Eastern aromatics, and yet the demand never lessened. Wealthy Roman homeowners burned incense during meals, perfumed their clothing, scented their hair, and added spices to wine. The elite bathed in oils steeped with flowers or herbs. Religions, too, benefited from the aromatic networks. Jewish temples burned frankincense and myrrh as part of their ancient rituals. Christian traditions later adopted incense for liturgy. Early Islamic cultures valued aromatic materials for hygiene, hospitality, and religious ceremonies. Buddhism spread incense use across East and Southeast Asia. In all these traditions, incense symbolized purification, prayer, and the ephemeral nature of life. Economies grew complex around these desires. Taxes were imposed on spice shipments. Caravans needed armed escorts. Ports established customs offices. Kingdoms fought for control of strategic markets. The Nabateans became masters of the incense route, taxing caravans and storing goods in Petra's hidden vaults. South Arabian kingdoms such as Saba and Hadramaut flourished through resin exports. Indian coastal regions developed specialized spice markets. Chinese dynasties protected camphor groves. Behind this vast economic machine were the people who worked intimately with the plants. Harvesters climbed cinnamon trees to cut inner bark with precision. Frankincense collectors scaled rocky slopes to score tree trunks, allowing resin to drip and harden. Pepper farmers tended vines through monsoon rains. Rose gatherers rose before dawn to pluck petals while their fragrance was strongest. Their labor, dangerous and delicate, shaped global trade. As centuries passed, new routes formed. Maritime networks expanded as sailors mastered monsoon winds. Land routes shifted with political changes. Empires rose and fell. But the flow of fragrance continued. Even when wars disrupted trade, new paths emerged. Through Persia, through Central Asia, across the Indian Ocean, through the Red Sea, across the Sahara. The world had grown too addicted to aroma to let it disappear. Ultimately, the trade in fragrances did something few other commodities achieved. It connected continents in a shared sensory experience. A scent from one corner of the world could evoke longing in another. Aromas created bridges where no political alliance existed. They made distant lands familiar long before maps could capture them. Today, echoes of those ancient networks still shape our world. Modern perfumery relies heavily on ingredients once carried by camel caravans and spice ships. The perfume industry draws from Indian jasmine, Arabian oud, Somali myrrh, Omani frankincense, Chinese camphor, and countless other materials shaped by ancient roots. Even the global fascination with spices, from pepper to cinnamon to cardamom, has its origins in these early exchanges. The rise of aromas along ancient trade routes is ultimately a story about curiosity and desire, how humans pursued beauty across deserts and oceans, how they risked danger for the sake of scent, how invisible fragrances transformed economies, reshaped cultures, and connected worlds long before the idea of global trade existed. It is a reminder that sometimes the most powerful forces in history are the ones that cannot be seen, only sensed, whispers carried on the air, traveling farther than caravans, deeper than ships, shaping the world one breath at a time. As the incense, spices, and oils moved across continents, entire cultures began to adapt not only economically but socially and ritually to their presence. In Mesopotamia, the use of aromatics became a sign of status and devotion, distinguishing the elite from the common people. Temples stored large quantities of frankincense, myrrh, and balsam, distributing them during festivals and rituals. Scent permeated daily life, Scholars burned sandalwood during study. Healers included aromatic oils and remedies, and citizens perfumed their homes to emulate the luxury of nobility. The demand for fragrances encouraged specialization in production. Entire villages were devoted to cultivating aromatic plants, extracting oils, and crafting incense sticks, creating localized economies that relied on a single sensory product. Across the Indian subcontinent, spice cultivation became a meticulous art. Pepper vines were carefully tended in humid regions, cardamom pods harvested by hand, and turmeric roots dried and powdered for both flavor and fragrance. Indian ports, such as Mazaris and later Calicut, became bustling centers of commerce. Sailors, merchants, and artisans intertwined, exchanging goods as well as stories, scientific knowledge, and techniques for processing spices. Aromatics were often presented as diplomatic gifts. An envoy from India or Sri Lanka might arrive in Egypt or Rome bearing jars of cinnamon, cloves, or nutmeg, sealing political and trade agreements with their fragrance. Such exchanges forged cultural bridges, spreading culinary techniques, medicinal practices, and even artistic motifs across continents. Aromas, in this sense, were both tangible and symbolic currencies. The Silk Road, stretching thousands of miles across deserts and mountains, played a pivotal role in the transmission of fragrance. Caravans brought saffron, mace, and cassia from India and Sri Lanka to Persia, Central Asia, and China. In return, camphor, rhubarb, and exotic resins traveled westward. Cities along the route, such as Samarkand, Bactra, and Chang'an, became cosmopolitan melting pots where merchants from diverse regions gathered to trade aromatic goods alongside textiles, metals, and spices. Markets became theaters of scent, with each stall offering a unique olfactory experience. Travelers wrote extensively about these fragrances, often noting how scents alone could identify a region or culture. A whiff of high-quality frankincense signaled Arabian origin, while the warm, musky aroma of certain resins indicated Indian provenance. The economic impact of aromatic trade extended far beyond personal consumption. Entire kingdoms and empires relied on revenue from these commodities. The Nabateans, for instance, controlled the incense trade through Petra and levied taxes on every caravan passing through their territory. The wealth accumulated allowed them to build monumental architecture, including the famed treasury and monastery, whose grandeur was inseparable from the riches earned through resin trade. In South Arabia, kingdoms like Saba thrived primarily because of the incense and spice trade. Royal courts sponsored expeditions to secure new sources, sometimes leading to military campaigns or strategic alliances. Aromatics were, therefore, not merely luxury items. They were instruments of political and economic power. Maritime trade further transformed the global movement of fragrances. With the monsoon winds mastered by Indian, Arabian, and later Persian sailors, spices, oils, and resins could be transported in large quantities across the Indian Ocean. Ships laden with pepper, cinnamon, frankincense, and myrrh traveled from Kerala and Sri Lanka to ports in Yemen, Egypt, and the Red Sea. From there, they reached the Mediterranean, where Roman and Greek demand for exotic scents fueled a thriving commercial network. These maritime routes reduced reliance on long and hazardous overland journeys, allowing more stable, predictable supply chains. The ocean itself became a corridor of aroma, carrying scents thousands of miles and creating a shared sensory experience across distant lands. The cultural significance of fragrances spread alongside the physical commodities. Aromatic plants and their derivatives were integrated into religious, medical, and social practices. In Egypt, for example, perfumed oils were used not only in temples but also in personal grooming and embalming. Royal courts in Rome and Greece incorporated exotic spices into baths, oils, and perfumes, demonstrating both wealth and refinement. In China, the use of incense became central to Confucian and Buddhist practices, facilitating meditation and worship. Aromatics symbolized purity, status, and spiritual connection, reinforcing social hierarchies while simultaneously linking cultures through shared sensory experiences. Aromatic trade also shaped cuisine, medicine, and daily life. Spices like pepper, ginger, and cardamom transformed culinary practices across continents. Indian traders introduced pepper to Egypt, which eventually reached Rome, changing the flavor profile of foods and inspiring new culinary traditions. Medicinally, resins like myrrh and frankincense were prized for their antiseptic and healing properties. In China and India, aromatic herbs were incorporated into complex medical systems, blending with diet, massage, and spiritual practices. The movement of fragrances facilitated the exchange of knowledge about health, rituals, and lifestyle, making aroma a vector of both cultural and intellectual exchange. Over centuries, the aromatic trade became entangled with exploration and empire building. European powers, driven by the desire for spices and fragrances, embarked on maritime explorations in the late Middle Ages and Renaissance. Portuguese, Dutch, and later British fleets navigated the Indian Ocean, seeking to monopolize spice-producing regions. Colonization often followed, reshaping local economies, societies, and environments. Pursuit of aroma had transformed from ancient caravan routes to global imperial ambitions. Entire continents became interconnected, with fragrances guiding diplomacy, commerce, and conquest. The pursuit of scents that had once been a religious offering or luxury, indulgence now drove international politics and colonial expansion. The impact of aromatic trade is still evident today. Modern perfumery relies on ingredients sourced along historical routes: sandalwood from India, rose oil from Bulgaria and Turkey, frankincense from Somalia and Oman, and spices from Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and India. The perfumes we wear, the incense burned in spiritual practices, and even the flavors in our cuisine trace their lineage to centuries of trade and human ingenuity. Without the global exchange of aromatic goods, our sensory landscape, our concept of luxury, our tastes, and our cultural rituals would be dramatically different. The rise of aromas along trade routes is a story not merely of commodities, but of human ambition, ingenuity, and desire. Fragrances connected disparate lands and peoples, creating networks that were economic, cultural, and spiritual. They transformed deserts, jungles, ports, and cities into nodes of commerce and culture. They linked kingdoms, empires, and civilizations, demonstrating that human societies could be profoundly shaped by something as subtle as scent. Aromas were catalysts for innovation, motivators for exploration, and symbols of status and devotion. Even today, when a fragrance is worn or a spice is added to a meal, the legacy of those ancient trade routes lives on. Every inhalation is a connection to traders who crossed deserts and oceans, to harvesters who climbed trees and dug roots, to artisans who distilled, ground, and blended raw ingredients into scents that would transform societies. Aromas were the early threads of globalization, weaving together continents, economies, and cultures long before the modern world recognized the term. They remain a testament to the extraordinary power of the invisible, proving that the movement of something as intangible as scent can leave an indelible mark on history. The trade in fragrances teaches us about human curiosity and the pursuit of beauty. It reminds us that what we value often transcends utility. Scents do not feed the body, yet they nourished economies and connected empires. Fragrances do not build cities, yet the wealth they generated funded monumental architecture, artistic expression, and social structures. Aromas, in essence, were a force that shaped both material and immaterial aspects of human civilization, guiding economies, diplomacy, religion, and culture through an invisible, irresistible language of scent. From the deserts of Arabia to the jungles of India, from the mountains of Somalia to the ports of the Mediterranean, fragrances charted the contours of human civilization. They moved silently yet decisively, carried by the hands of merchants, sailors, and laborers. They transformed daily life, religion, art, and politics. Their reach was profound because they appealed to something universal, the human sense of smell, which transcends language, borders, and time. In every market, temple, and palace, the aroma of distant lands reminded people of the wider world and of the shared experiences that connected humanity across continents. In some, the rise of aromas along the trade routes was a transformative phenomenon. It was not simply a story of luxury or indulgence, but of interconnectedness and innovation. The demand for spices, resins, and oils drove exploration, shaped empires, enriched societies, and created cultural networks that endured for millennia. By following the trail of scents, one can trace the story of human ambition, creativity, and connection, revealing that even the most subtle of sensory experiences can leave a profound imprint on the course of history. Through fragrance, ancient civilizations spoke, traded, worshipped, and connected, proving that the invisible, ephemeral, and intangible can indeed wield power greater than gold or stone, shaping the human world in ways both profound and enduring. In the ancient Mediterranean, where the sunlight shimmered off marble temples and the scent of the sea mingled with the smoke of oil lamps, fragrance was more than mere adornment. It was a language, a symbol, a currency, and above all, a marker of status. Among the elites of Greece and Rome, perfume was intertwined with identity, politics, and culture, transforming the simple act of wearing scent into an emblem of beauty, power, and indulgence. It was an obsession that went beyond personal enjoyment, seeping into religion, warfare, diplomacy, and daily life, reflecting the society's fascination with luxury, influence, and the human desire to leave a lasting impression. In Greece, perfume and scented oils had deep roots in both ritual and daily life. The earliest records show that the Minoans, Mycenaeans, and later city-states like Athens used fragrant oils extensively. Olive oil, naturally abundant, was often infused with aromatic herbs, flowers, or resins. This mixture became the medium for not only personal hygiene but also social display. Greeks associated fragrance with physical beauty, spiritual purity, and even athletic performance. Athletes rubbed perfumed oils onto their skin before competitions, both to enhance their appearance and to honor the gods. These oils were not trivial. They represented wealth, sophistication, and dedication to the ideals of the body and spirit. To possess a finely scented oil meant more than fragrance. It was an assertion of cultural and social refinement. Perfume in Greece was closely linked to mythology and divine emulation. The gods themselves were described as possessing perfect beauty and carrying ethereal scents. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, was said to exude a fragrance that inspired desire, while Apollo, god of the sun and arts, was associated with warmth, freshness, and clarity in scent. Mortals sought to replicate these divine qualities through perfume, believing that fragrance could elevate human presence, allure, and charisma. This belief influenced social rituals, festivals, religious ceremonies, and theater performances often involved elaborate applications of scented oils. Perfume was more than a cosmetic. It was a conduit for embodying divine ideals and cultural values. The Greek obsession with fragrance extended to daily life in the home. Wealthy households maintained extensive collections of oils and perfumes, often stored in intricately decorated alabaster or ceramic vessels. Some homes featured private chambers dedicated to fragrance preparation, where servants or perfumers mixed oils with flowers, herbs, and resins. These mixtures were used in baths, massages, and grooming, reflecting an understanding that scent was inseparable from personal identity. A citizen entering a home would be subtly judged by the quality and type of fragrance emanating from its inhabitants. Scent was social currency, capable of signaling wealth, taste, and refinement without uttering a single word. The Greek obsession spread and intensified with the rise of Rome. Roman elites, inspired by Greek culture and eager to surpass it, embraced perfume on an unprecedented scale. In Rome, fragrance became a central aspect of luxury and power, permeating every layer of elite life. Wealthy families imported exotic oils, resins, and spices from across the empire and beyond, establishing networks of trade that brought perfumes from Egypt, Arabia, India, and the East. The logistics alone, shipping rose oil from Syria, frankincense from Arabia, and sandalwood from India, reflected both the resources and the ambition of Roman aristocracy. Fragrance was no longer a personal adornment. It was a political statement, a reflection of an empire's reach, and a demonstration of social superiority. Roman fascination with scent was visible in the rituals of bathing and hygiene, which were themselves lavish performances. Public and private baths were central to social life, and the application of oils, perfumes, and scented unguents became an art form. Patrons would immerse themselves in oils infused with herbs and flowers, often followed by perfumes applied in delicate, precise rituals. Massages and scrubbing treatments were accompanied by fragrant oils that enhanced the sensory experience and elevated the body to a near-divine state. Scent enveloped the skin and lingered in the air, leaving an invisible signature of wealth and refinement. The more exotic the fragrance, the higher the status of its wearer. Roman culture also celebrated perfume in festivals, theater, and entertainment. Actors, musicians, and performers often applied scented oils before taking the stage, creating an aura of allure and authority. In ceremonial processions, elites were anointed with fragrances that emphasized their prominence. Even in military contexts, generals sometimes employed scented oils, asserting dominance and sophistication alongside martial prowess. Fragrance was a tool of psychological influence, shaping perception, inspiring loyalty, and signaling control. The olfactory sense became a subtle instrument in power dynamics, diplomacy, and courtly intrigue. Perfume's role in Roman society extended to medicine and magic. Aromatic oils were believed to have therapeutic properties capable of calming the mind, soothing the body, and purifying the spirit. Roman physicians prescribed fragrances for ailments, from headaches to digestive discomfort, and aromatherapy-like practices were common among the elite. Scent also played a role in rituals meant to influence fortune and protection. Certain oils and incenses were burned to ward off evil spirits or attract favor from deities. The same perfumes that adorned skin or hair carried spiritual significance, reinforcing the idea that fragrance linked mortal and divine, body and soul, power and influence. The obsession with perfume was not confined to urban elites, but permeated court life and dynastic politics. Emperors and queens understood the symbolic weight of fragrance. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, famously employed perfumes in political strategy, enveloping herself in scents that dazzled and captivated allies and adversaries alike. Roman emperors, too, used fragrance to enhance authority, impress ambassadors, and assert cultural dominance. Perfume became a tool of seduction, persuasion, and display, reflecting both personal taste and the scope of imperial influence. A well-chosen scent could convey diplomacy, command attention, and assert sophistication in ways that words alone could not. The creation and trade of perfumes fueled economic networks that spanned continents. Ingredients were sourced from distant lands: myrrh from southern Arabia, frankincense from East Africa, roses from Syria, saffron from Persia, and spices from India. Perfumers became skilled artisans, often keeping formulas secret as closely guarded intellectual property. Workshops produced oils, ointments, and incense, combining raw materials with precise techniques to create complex, layered fragrances. The knowledge of blending, extracting, and preserving scents required expertise and was transmitted across generations, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of chemistry and botany long before these disciplines were formalized. Perfumes also became integral to artistic expression. Literature, poetry, and theater celebrated scent as a medium of beauty and desire. Roman poets such as Ovid and Martial wrote vividly of fragrant gardens, perfumed baths, and intoxicating aromas. Mythological tales described gods and heroes enveloped in scent, reinforcing cultural ideals of elegance, attraction, and divine favor. Fragrance became a narrative device, a sensory motif that conveyed emotion, status, and cultural sophistication. In this way, perfume transcended mere utility, entering the realm of art and imagination. The obsession with fragrance in Greece and Rome also shaped gender norms and social expectations. Women of the elite class were expected to cultivate an extensive knowledge of perfumes, oils, and cosmetics. Their choice of scent conveyed beauty, refinement, and desirability, influencing social standing and marital prospects. Men, too, used fragrance strategically, signaling status, wealth, and personal hygiene. The rituals of applying oils and perfumes became deeply gendered, codifying social behaviors while reinforcing the connection between appearance, aroma, and authority. Fragrance functioned as a form of social literacy, a nonverbal code that signaled alignment with cultural ideals. Perfume's influence extended to architecture and urban life. Temples, theaters, baths, and private villas were designed to accommodate the pervasive presence of scent. Air circulation, incense burners, perfumed water fountains, and storage spaces were integrated to maximize olfactory impact. The experience of entering a space was not only visual and tactile, but olfactory. Fragrance guided mood, behavior, and social perception. The architecture of scent became an invisible yet essential aspect of civic and domestic life, shaping how people interacted and perceived their environment. The obsession with perfume in Greece and Rome also led to experimentation and innovation. Artisans explored distillation, maceration, and infusion techniques to preserve delicate fragrances and combine complex notes. They studied the effects of temperature, storage, and mixing, creating blends that could last for years without losing potency. Exotic and rare ingredients were highly prized, and new sources were constantly sought through exploration, trade, and diplomatic contact. The pursuit of superior fragrance drove scientific curiosity, commerce, and artistic achievement simultaneously, intertwining culture, economy, and innovation. The Roman elite's extravagant use of perfume sometimes bordered on excess. Accounts describe baths where perfumed oils were poured in abundance, bedrooms filled with scented smoke, and banquets where guests were doused in fragrance to enhance ambience. Pliny the Elder lamented the enormous sums spent on perfumes, claiming that they drained the treasury and encouraged vanity. Yes, this illustrates the symbolic power of scent. It was a marker of distinction, an assertion of taste, and an expression of influence. Perfume signaled identity, wealth, and authority in ways that no other medium could achieve. Religious practices continued to reinforce the importance of fragrance. Greek temples burned incense during sacrifices, festivals, and daily rituals. Roman temples employed perfumed oils to anoint statues of gods, enhance ceremonial processions, and purify sacred spaces. Scent became a bridge between the mortal and divine, reinforcing societal hierarchies while integrating spiritual practice into daily life. Food. The sacred and the secular intertwine through fragrance, demonstrating its multifaceted significance. In literature, art, and material culture, the obsession with perfume is omnipresent. Perfume vessels were elaborately decorated, often shaped like animals, deities, or symbolic forms. Mosaic floors depicted scenes of perfumed gardens. Jewelry incorporated scent containers, allowing the wearer to carry fragrances discreetly. Perfumes inspired poetry, drama, and myth, illustrating how scent permeated every aspect of elite culture. The sensory environment of the Mediterranean world was inseparable from fragrance, shaping human experience in profound ways. Over time, the legacy of Greece and Rome's perfume obsession influenced subsequent civilizations. The knowledge of aromatic plants, distillation techniques, and blending spread through trade and conquest. Byzantine, Islamic, and later European cultures inherited and refined these practices, preserving the centrality of fragrance in luxury, ritual, and medicine. The Mediterranean obsession with scent became a foundational chapter in the global history of perfume, demonstrating how luxury, culture, and power converge through olfactory experience. Perfume in Greece and Rome also symbolized indulgence and pleasure, linking sensory enjoyment to social identity. The use of fragrances extended beyond necessity or ritual to the pursuit of comfort, aesthetic pleasure, and personal expression. Perfume was a medium through which the elite could differentiate themselves from commoners, signal refinement, and assert cultural leadership. It was both intimate and public, personal and performative, creating an invisible yet unmistakable signature of individuality and social standing. The obsession with fragrance was not limited to the wealthy alone, but shaped societal aspirations. Common citizens admired, imitated, and desired the scents of the elite, fueling local production of oils, perfumes, and resins. Artisans, merchants, and perfumers formed a dynamic industry catering to this demand. From the creation of simple scented oils to complex blended perfumes, the fragrance economy became an engine of innovation, commerce, and cultural transmission, connecting different layers of society through scent. Perfume was democratized to a degree, yet always remained a potent symbol of privilege. In sum, the royal obsession with perfume in Greece and Rome was a multidimensional phenomenon, encompassing beauty, power, spirituality, and indulgence. It shaped architecture, ritual, social hierarchy, commerce, and culture. Fragrance became a symbol of identity, a medium of influence, and an instrument of desire. Through the meticulous preparation of oils, the lavish application of perfumes, and the pervasive presence of scent in public and private life, the elites of Greece and Rome communicated wealth, sophistication, and cultural authority. Perfume was a tool of persuasion, a marker of divine emulation, a symbol of social hierarchy, and a source of aesthetic pleasure. The enduring fascination with fragrance in these civilizations illustrates the profound human desire to elevate existence through sensory experience. Perfume transformed everyday life into a theater of beauty and influence, bridging private indulgence and public display. From ritual baths to imperial courts, from sacred temples to perfumed gardens, the Mediterranean world was enveloped in an invisible network of scent, shaping behavior, identity, and power. By understanding this obsession, we glimpse how something as ephemeral as fragrance can wield enduring influence over culture, society, and history, revealing the extraordinary potency of human desire to command beauty, assert authority, and communicate identity through the universal language of scent. The obsession with perfume among Greek and Roman elites extended beyond daily rituals and baths. It permeated politics, diplomacy, and even military display. Ambassadors arriving in foreign courts often carried elaborate gifts of perfumes and scented oils, signaling both wealth and cultural sophistication. These aromatic gifts were not casual offerings. They were carefully selected, often sourced from distant lands, and sometimes accompanied by exotic vessels crafted from precious metals or stones. In a society where status was paramount, a foreign envoy's success in diplomacy could hinge on the quality and rarity of the scents presented. The aromatic offerings became a subtle language of influence, a negotiation conducted not in words, but in the lingering impression of fragrance. Royalty and aristocrats also used perfume strategically in social gatherings. Roman feasts, for example, were multisensory experiences where aroma played a central role. Exotic perfumes were applied to guests, tables, linens, and even the walls of banquet halls. The scents mingled with the flavors of food and wine, creating an immersive atmosphere that reinforced the host's prestige and the exclusivity of the occasion. Perfumes acted as a social equalizer in a controlled way. While all participants could enjoy the fragrance, only the wealthy could afford its continuous and abundant use. This display of luxury emphasized hierarchy, and the invisible presence of scent became a silent communicator of privilege. In Greek and Roman theater, scent served an aesthetic and performative function. Perfumed oils were applied to actors to create an aura of charm, allure, or divine association. Playwrights and poets often referenced fragrance in their works, drawing parallels between aroma and character, virtue, or desire. Audiences were not only captivated by visual and verbal performance, but also by the subtle layers of scent that reinforced narrative themes. In this context, perfume was intertwined with culture, emotion, and storytelling, enhancing the sensory depth of artistic expression. The obsession with aroma also had a profound effect on personal identity and gender expression. In elite circles, women curated their perfumes with meticulous attention, selecting blends that complemented clothing, jewelry, and social setting. Roman matrons and Greek aristocratic women were known to spend hours preparing scented oils, often employing specialized servants or perfumers who create custom blends. Men, particularly in Rome, also engaged in fragrant preparation, using oils and balms not only for grooming but as markers of status and sophistication. Perfume became a code. Its choice, quality, and application communicated wealth, taste, and social awareness. This sensory literacy was essential for navigating elite circles. Perfume's integration into religious and ceremonial life added another layer to its significance. Both Greek and Roman rituals employed aromatic oils and incense as offerings to gods and spirits. Temples burned large quantities of incense during festivals, and statues of deities were anointed with perfumes to signify sanctity. Priests and priestesses were trained in the preparation and application of fragrant oils. Certain scents were believed to attract divine favor, purify spaces, and even influence the outcome of rituals. In this way, perfume bridged the human and divine, reinforcing social hierarchies while elevating everyday experience to a sacred plane. The physical beauty of these objects enhanced the sensory experience, making perfume an art form that combined olfactory, visual, and tactile pleasure. In this way, fragrance became inseparable from material culture, symbolizing taste, refinement, and status. Social rituals around scent reinforced hierarchy and exclusivity. Guests at banquets or gatherings were subtly marked by fragrance. Certain oils were reserved for close family, elite friends, or distinguished visitors. Perfumes signified access, intimacy, and social knowledge. The mere presence or absence of scent could communicate subtle messages about status, favor, or personal alignment within social hierarchies. In public ceremonies, temples, or courts, fragrance acted as a medium for expressing authority, civility, and cultural literacy. To master scent was to command attention, respect, and influence. Historical anecdotes illustrate the extremes of this royal obsession. Cleopatra famously used perfume as a political tool, layering scents during meetings with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony to captivate and influence. Roman emperors employed extravagant fragrances during public appearances, using scent to assert imperial majesty and control perception. Women of the imperial court curated personal blends that reflected their taste, social standing, and political acumen. These practices demonstrate that perfume was not merely indulgence but an instrument of power, diplomacy, and social strategy. The education of youth in elite households often included instruction in the use of fragrance. Young aristocrats learned the art of blending oils, selecting perfumes appropriate for different occasions, and understanding the cultural significance of various scents. This knowledge reinforced social cohesion, transmitting values, tastes, and expectations across generations. Fragrance education was as much about cultural literacy as it was about personal hygiene or pleasure, ensuring that scent remained a central aspect of elite identity. Perfume's enduring legacy in Greece and Rome is reflected in the continuity of fragrance traditions throughout Europe and the Mediterranean. Techniques developed in these civilizations influenced Byzantine perfumery, Islamic alchemy, and scent creation, and later European Renaissance perfume culture. The Roman and Greek emphasis on luxury, artistry, and ritualized use of perfume set a template that persisted for centuries, demonstrating the enduring cultural power of scent as both a personal and societal marker. The use of perfume in Greece and Rome also influenced gender dynamics, courtly intrigue, and personal expression. Women's mastery of scent could assert social influence, attract allies, or signal autonomy within constrained social roles. Men's use of perfume conveyed wealth, refinement, and sophistication, subtly negotiating masculinity through olfactory presence. Perfume became a nonverbal dialogue, shaping perceptions, relationships, and opportunities in ways that extended beyond spoken language. Its role in courtly politics, romantic pursuit, and social positioning underscores its significance as a tool of influence and identity. In sum, the royal obsession with perfume in Greece and Rome exemplifies the profound intersections of luxury, power, culture, and art. Perfume was not merely a tool of aesthetic indulgence. It was a medium of social communication, a marker of authority, and a vehicle for cultural expression. From baths to banquets, temples to theaters, perfumed oils and exotic resins permeated elite life, shaping perception, identity, and influence. Through careful curation, skilled perfumers, and global trade networks, fragrance became a defining feature of civilization, leaving a legacy that continues to inform the modern world's understanding of beauty, refinement, and the cultural power of scent. As the Roman Empire faded into history, Europe entered a period often referred to as the Dark Ages. Though even in this apparent darkness, the human fascination with fragrance never disappeared. Perfume, once a luxury of emperors and aristocrats, found new avenues through religious devotion, medicinal practice, and the emerging curiosity of alchemy. In this period, scent became more than adornment. It became a bridge between the mystical and the practical, a medium through which humans explored the limits of both spiritual and scientific understanding. The medieval revival of fragrance represents a pivotal moment in history when the intangible qualities of scent intertwined with early science, ritual, and the imagination of alchemists, setting the stage for innovations that would ripple into modern perfumery. During the early medieval period, monastic communities became custodians of aromatic knowledge. Monks preserved and transcribed texts from antiquity that detailed the preparation of oils, ointments, and incense, ensuring that the methods developed by Greeks and Romans were not lost. Within monastery walls, perfumes were created for both devotional and practical purposes. Incense burned during Mass was infused with resins such as frankincense, myrrh, and benzoin, believed to carry prayers to heaven. Medicinal applications included scented oils for treating ailments, soothing the sick, and maintaining hygiene in a time when disease was common. These early applications of fragrance exemplify the medieval intertwining of the sacred and the utilitarian, a precursor to later scientific exploration. Monks and apothecaries often worked in tandem, experimenting with herbs, flowers, and minerals to create new blends. Lavender, rosemary, sage, and rose were cultivated for their aromatic and medicinal properties. The distillation of rose water, a practice inherited from Arab chemists, became increasingly sophisticated in monasteries and small workshops. Perfumes were no longer simply pressed or macerated. They were distilled, infused, and sometimes combined with alcohol or other solvents to increase potency and longevity. This blending of technique and experimentation laid the groundwork for what would become the art and science of perfumery. The influence of the Islamic Golden Age on medieval European fragrance was profound. Scholars, chemists, and alchemists in the Arab world refined the art of distillation, creating concentrated essential oils and extracting the most delicate scents from flowers, resins, and spices. These innovations arrived in Europe through trade, crusades, and scholarly exchange, bringing with them a new understanding of the chemistry behind fragrance. Arab chemists experimented with alcohol as a solvent, developed glass vessels for distillation, and documented complex techniques for combining ingredients. European alchemists and perfumers eagerly adopted and adapted these methods, blending them with local traditions, herbs, and spiritual practices. Alchemy, with its mixture of mysticism, science, and philosophy, played a central role in the medieval revival of perfume. Alchemists saw fragrance as a reflection of the hidden order of nature, believing that the essence of a plant or resin contained its divine spirit. Distillation and extraction were not purely practical. They were considered acts of transformation, turning the raw material into something pure, potent, and spiritually significant. Alchemists wrote extensively on the symbolic and literal power of aromatic substances, noting how different scents could influence mood, thought, and even fate. Perfume became a medium through which humans could glimpse the divine, manipulate the senses, and explore the boundaries of material and spiritual knowledge. The blending of mysticism and early science led to the creation of increasingly complex aromatic compounds. Rose, lavender, orange blossom, and herbs such as basil and thyme were combined with exotic resins, spices, and essential oils to produce fragrances that were both pleasing and symbolic. Each scent was believed to have specific virtues: rosemary for memory, lavender for calm, myrrh for purification, and frankincense for divine connection. The act of blending these ingredients was ritualized with precise measures, timings, and techniques passed down through apprenticeships. Perfumers became a hybrid of scientist, artist, and mystic, manipulating both matter and meaning in each bottle. Trade during the medieval period ensured that Europe remained connected to the world of rare and exotic aromatics. Spices, resins, and fragrant woods continued to arrive from Arabia, India, Africa, and the East Indies, carried over long and perilous routes by merchants, pilgrims, and crusaders. Venice, Florence, and other Mediterranean ports became hubs for aromatic goods, with markets that overflowed with sandalwood, ambergris, cinnamon, and cloves. The movement of these materials allowed European alchemists and perfumers to experiment with new blends, combining indigenous herbs with foreign spices to create perfumes that were both innovative and luxurious. The globalization of fragrance began in earnest, facilitated by commerce, exploration, and the curiosity of a society in transition. The medieval fascination with scent was also deeply intertwined with medicine and the emerging practice of chemistry. Physicians prescribed aromatic oils and balms to treat everything from digestive problems to melancholy. Herbs and resins were incorporated into plasters, poultices, and infused waters, with the aroma considered as important as the physical effects. Rose water, lavender oil, and rosemary extracts were valued for their antiseptic and calming properties, often used in both public hospitals and private homes. Perfume was not frivolous. It was considered essential for health, hygiene, and emotional well-being, bridging the gap between the mystical and the practical. Religious ritual amplified the role of fragrances. Churches burned incense not only to create a sacred atmosphere, but also because the smoke and scent were thought to purify and protect spaces from evil. Aromatic oils were used in sacraments, anointing, and the preparation of relics. Festivals, pilgrimages, and coronations all employed perfumes to communicate power, sanctity, and spiritual significance. The scents that enveloped cathedrals and monasteries were not merely decorative. They were integral to the experience of worship, linking the material world to the divine and reinforcing social hierarchy and spiritual order. Alchemists of the medieval period often documented their experiments with meticulous care, recording not only techniques, but the symbolic significance of each ingredient. Gold, mercury, sulfur, and salt were sometimes combined with aromatic substances, reflecting the alchemical belief in transmutation and the unity of physical and spiritual worlds. Perfume bottles and distillation apparatus became instruments of both science and ritual, representing humanity's desire to harness and understand the unseen forces of nature. The laboratory was a place where mysticism and chemistry converged, giving rise to innovations that would resonate in later centuries of perfumery. In addition to Europe, Islamic scholars and artisans expanded the understanding of fragrance through sophisticated methods of extraction and preservation. Distillation techniques refined by figures such as Avicenna allowed the creation of concentrated essential oils that retained the essence of delicate flowers, like rose and jasmine. These innovations traveled through Spain and the Mediterranean into Europe, inspiring medieval alchemists and perfumers. Knowledge of alcohol-based extraction, maceration, and layering of scents transformed European approaches to perfume, merging scientific insight with artistic and spiritual application. The creation and use of perfume in medieval society also intersected with social rituals and courtly life. Kings, queens, and nobles used fragrance to assert authority, influence behavior, and communicate sophistication. Perfumed gloves, clothing, and chambers were status symbols, signaling wealth and taste. Guests entering a royal court or noble residence were immediately enveloped in scents that impressed, persuaded, and delineated social hierarchy. Perfume became a language of power, subtle yet unmistakable, influencing relationships and perceptions in political and social spheres. Gardens played an important role in the medieval revival of fragrance. Monastic, royal, and private gardens were cultivated with aromatic plants such as roses, lavender, sage, rosemary, and thyme. These gardens served multiple purposes: sources of raw materials, centers for experimentation, and symbols of cultivation and refinement. The act of tending fragrant plants was itself imbued with ritual and significance, representing the intersection of nature, art, and human intention. Garden design incorporated olfactory experiences, arranging plants so that movement through pathways would reveal layers of scent, guiding visitors' emotional and spiritual response. Perfume also became a vehicle for cross-cultural exchange. Aromatic materials, techniques, and ideas traveled from the Islamic world, the Far East, and Africa into European workshops, transforming medieval practices. Recipes for oils, distillates, and incense were translated and adapted, blending local and foreign ingredients. This integration of knowledge demonstrates the collaborative and dynamic nature of the medieval aromatic revival, highlighting how science, trade, and culture converged in the pursuit of fragrance. The alchemical understanding of scent in the medieval period laid the foundation for modern chemistry and perfumery. By approaching aroma as both a physical and spiritual substance, alchemists explored principles of extraction, combination, and preservation that remain relevant today. The experimentation with solvents, distillation apparatus, and layering of fragrances represents an early form of empirical investigation, blending observation, theory, and artistry. Perfume became a laboratory for understanding nature, human perception, and the interplay between material and symbolic properties. The medieval revival of fragrance also influenced literature, art, and philosophy. Poets, chroniclers, and theologians wrote extensively about scent, linking aroma to virtue, passion, and divine favor. Religious texts highlighted the spiritual significance of incense and perfumed oils, while secular literature celebrated luxury, beauty, and desire. Artistic representations depicted gardens, vessels, and ceremonies suffused with fragrance, capturing the sensory culture of the era. Perfume, therefore, functioned as a bridge between sensory experience, intellectual inquiry, and cultural expression, shaping the worldview of medieval Europe and beyond. Innovation in distillation and preservation also advanced the accessibility of fragrance. While perfumes remained expensive and largely confined to elites, improved methods allowed greater consistency, potency, and longevity of aromatic products. European alchemists synthesized exotic scents using combinations of imported spices, herbs, and resins, creating new olfactory experiences. This ingenuity reflected both the practical desire for quality fragrance and the mystical aspiration to capture the essence of nature and spirit. Perfume was simultaneously a scientific, artistic, and spiritual endeavor, reflecting the multidimensional character of medieval alchemy. Over time, the combination of science, mysticism, and fragrance contributed to the emergence of new cultural practices. Rituals, medicine, and social display became increasingly codified around aromatic substances. Perfume signified sophistication, spiritual awareness, and social intelligence, intertwining personal identity with communal experience. The alchemical approach to scent, viewing it as a manifestation of hidden forces, transformed perception, elevating fragrance from mere luxury to a medium for understanding the world, human emotion, and the divine. Medieval perfumery was thus a revolutionary fusion of sensory pleasure, intellectual inquiry, and mystical aspiration. In sum, the medieval revival and the alchemist's engagement with fragrance represent a transformative moment in history. Perfume evolved from a luxury of antiquity into a multidimensional phenomenon encompassing science, mysticism, commerce, and culture. Through distillation, experimentation, and ritual application, medieval Europe developed techniques, ideas, and practices that would shape the future of perfumery. Aromatic materials connected continents, ideas, and traditions, bridging gaps between the material and spiritual worlds. The medieval fascination with fragrance illustrates humanity's enduring desire to explore, refine, and elevate the senses, transforming scent into a medium of knowledge, devotion, and artistic expression that would resonate for centuries to come. The medieval fascination with fragrance was inseparable from the lives of rulers, nobles, and religious leaders who recognized the power of scent, shape perception, and influence behavior. Royal courts became centers of aromatic experimentation, where perfumed oils, incense, and scented powders were used to impress visiting dignitaries and demonstrate sophistication. Monarchs like Charlemagne and later European kings maintained elaborate workshops for the preparation of perfumes and ointments. These workshops employed alchemists, apothecaries, and gardeners to ensure a constant supply of rare and exotic scents. The use of perfume in court life extended beyond mere indulgence. It was an essential tool of diplomacy, status signaling, and cultural display. Perfume also became an instrument of spiritual devotion in the medieval period. Monasteries, abbeys, and cathedrals used incense and aromatic oils not only for ritual, but also for creating an atmosphere conducive to meditation and prayer. Specific scents were believed to facilitate divine communication. Frankincense symbolized purity and ascension. Myrrh represented suffering and redemption, and aromatic herbs such as sage and lavender were thought to ward off evil and promote clarity of mind. The olfactory experience of worshippers was intentionally heightened, with fragrances guiding emotional states and reinforcing theological concepts. This integration of scent into spiritual practice reinforced the belief that fragrance had a power beyond the material world. Alchemists in medieval Europe regarded perfume as a form of transformation, akin to their quests to transmute base metals into gold. Extracting the essence of plants, flowers, and resins was both a technical and philosophical endeavor. They believed that the soul of the plant could be captured and concentrated, producing a substance that reflected the hidden order of nature. This belief elevated the creation of perfume from a craft to a mystical practice. The distillation apparatus became a sacred tool, and the process of blending aromatic ingredients was accompanied by precise rituals, reflecting a profound respect for the power of nature and the mysteries of the universe. Trade routes continued to play a pivotal role in the medieval fragrance revival. Aromatic materials arrived from as far as India, Arabia, East Africa, and the islands of the spice route. European merchants, particularly in Venice, Genoa, and Florence, specialized in importing resins, spices, and essential oils. These exotic ingredients were highly prized by alchemists and perfumers who experimented with combinations that had never been attempted before. The accessibility of foreign scents allowed medieval Europe to merge indigenous herbs with imported spices, creating perfumes that were both novel and emblematic of wealth and cosmopolitan taste. Aromatics thus became a form of global currency, linking continents through scent and trade. Gardens became vital centers for the production and study of aromatic plants. Monasteries cultivated roses, lavender, rosemary, thyme, and other herbs, not only for culinary and medicinal purposes, but also for perfume production. Royal and noble estates featured elaborate gardens designed to enhance the sensory experience, with fragrant pathways, shaded groves, and water features that diffused aroma throughout the landscape. Garden design was both artistic and scientific. Plant selection, arrangement, and timing of harvests were carefully calculated to ensure maximum fragrance. These gardens became living laboratories, where alchemists and apothecaries tested the qualities of plants, experimented with distillation, and refined techniques for extracting and preserving scents. The intersection of medicine, alchemy, and fragrance was central to medieval culture. Physicians and apothecaries prescribed aromatic oils and herbal infusions for physical and mental ailments. Scent was believed to influence temperament, improve circulation, alleviate stress, and even protect against infectious diseases. Rosewater, lavender oil, camphor, and cinnamon were commonly recommended, demonstrating the dual role of perfume as both a luxury and a practical therapeutic tool. The combination of medicinal efficacy and sensory pleasure reinforced the perception that fragrance was a substance of extraordinary power, capable of transforming both body and spirit. Art and literature of the medieval period frequently celebrated fragrance. Illuminated manuscripts depicted fragrant gardens, perfume vessels, and ritual ceremonies, illustrating the centrality of scent in daily and spiritual life. Poets and chroniclers described perfumes as markers of virtue, elegance, and refinement, while allegories often connected specific scents to moral or spiritual qualities. Perfume, in this context, became more than a sensory experience. It was a symbol, a narrative device, and a medium for exploring complex cultural and philosophical ideas. The appreciation of aroma was intellectually as well as sensorially cultivated, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of its cultural significance. The production of perfumes required highly skilled artisans. Distillers and perfumers combined knowledge of botany, chemistry, and artistic intuition to create aromatic compounds that were complex, balanced, and enduring. Distillation techniques became more refined over time, incorporating alcohol, water, and oils to produce concentrated essences. Perfumers carefully studied the volatility of ingredients, the interactions between different scents, and the methods of preservation. Workshops often operated as centers of knowledge, with techniques passed from master to apprentice in strict secrecy. This preservation of expertise ensured continuity and innovation within the evolving perfume industry. Fragrance also became a tool of social and political influence. Royalty and nobility used perfume strategically to impress guests, assert authority, and define social hierarchies. Perfumed garments, gloves, and chambers conveyed refinement and control, while the careful layering of scents demonstrated discernment and taste. Courtiers, diplomats, and even religious figures relied on perfume to communicate status and cultural literacy. The invisible yet pervasive nature of scent made it a subtle but potent instrument, influencing perception, guiding behavior, and reinforcing societal structures. Medieval alchemists and perfumers also explored symbolic and mystical dimensions of scent. Each aromatic substance carried philosophical and spiritual meanings. Frankincense was associated with divine wisdom, myrrh with protection and healing, rose with love and purity, and sandalwood with tranquility. Blending scents was both a technical challenge and a metaphysical practice, with precise combinations believed to produce desired emotional or spiritual effects. Perfume thus became a medium for exploring human consciousness, bridging the gap between material craftsmanship and metaphysical inquiry. The social integration of perfume extended to festivals, ceremonies, and courtly entertainments. Perfumed oils and incense were integral to weddings, coronations, and public celebrations. The ritualized use of scent elevated events, creating immersive experiences that appealed to multiple senses. Nobles competed in displaying aromatic sophistication, commissioning unique blends or acquiring rare ingredients to impress peers. The presence of fragrance became synonymous with cultural refinement and moral virtue, reflecting the belief that the aesthetic environment could shape character, behavior, and social perception. Trade, science, and mysticism converged in the creation of exotic perfumes that defined medieval European luxury. Ingredients from distant lands, ambergris from the oceans, musk from animals, and rare resins from tropical forests were incorporated into complex compositions that reflected global reach and human ingenuity. European alchemists experimented with these materials, refining extraction methods, creating new blends, and documenting their discoveries. Perfume became a testament to curiosity, craftsmanship, and the human desire to engage with the unknown. Its creation and use embodied the medieval pursuit of knowledge, pleasure, and spiritual insight. Perfume workshops became centers of experimentation and innovation, where artisans combined empirical observation with philosophical speculation. Techniques for distillation, infusion, and layering were refined to achieve greater potency and harmony of scent. Alchemists studied the volatility of different ingredients, the effects of temperature and storage, and the interactions of multiple aromatic components. They experimented with methods to prolong fragrance, longevity, and enhance its intensity. These practical innovations were complemented by symbolic understanding, reflecting a worldview in which the material and spiritual, the sensory, and the mystical were inseparable. The medieval revival of perfume also influenced gender dynamics, social education, and personal identity. Knowledge of fragrance was considered an essential skill for the elite, with women and men learning to select, blend, and apply perfumes appropriate to their social role and occasion. Perfume became a medium for expressing taste, sophistication, and social awareness, with the choice of scent reflecting personal and familial identity. This olfactory literacy was both aesthetic and social, creating invisible codes that guided perception, communication, and behavior within hierarchical structures. In summary, the medieval revival and the involvement of alchemists transformed perfume into a multidimensional phenomenon that blended science, mysticism, and art. Through careful experimentation, meticulous craftsmanship, and spiritual contemplation, medieval Europe developed techniques and philosophies that would shape the future of perfumery. Fragrance became a vehicle for diplomacy, religious devotion, personal expression, and intellectual inquiry. Aromatics connected continents, inspired innovation, and bridged the material and spiritual world. The medieval obsession with scent demonstrates humanity's enduring desire to elevate the senses, explore the natural and mystical realms, and transform the intangible into a source of beauty, knowledge, and cultural significance. The Renaissance, a period of rebirth in art, science, and culture, also marked a profound transformation in the world of fragrance. Perfume, once confined to religious ritual, aristocratic indulgence, and mystical experimentation, began to evolve into a symbol of luxury, status, and personal identity on a scale previously unseen. This period saw the refinement of techniques, the globalization of ingredients, and the emergence of perfumery as both an art form and a commercial enterprise. Fragrance became an emblem of sophistication, a tool for social positioning, and a precursor to the modern multi-billion-dollar industry that spans continents today. During the Renaissance, the courts of Europe were epicenters of luxury and innovation, and perfume was at the heart of this cultural flowering. Italian city-states, particularly Venice and Florence, became hubs of aromatic trade and experimentation. Venice, with its strategic position on the Adriatic, served as a gateway for spices, resins, and exotic ingredients arriving from the Middle East, India, and Africa. Merchants and artisans imported ambergris, myrrh, sandalwood, and precious floral oils, creating an unprecedented palette of olfactory possibilities. Florence, meanwhile, became a center for artisanal perfumery, where skilled craftsmen and alchemists refined distillation techniques and experimented with new blends. These cities transformed perfume from a regional luxury into an international symbol of refinement. The Renaissance fascination with humanism and sensory experience contributed to perfume's rising prominence. Intellectuals and artists emphasized the importance of beauty, pleasure, and self-expression, and fragrance became an extension of these ideals. Perfume was no longer solely associated with the divine or mystical. It was deeply tied to individuality, social presence, and the cultivation of taste. Aristocrats adorned themselves with bespoke scents, commissioning unique blends that reflected personal style, familial heritage, and social ambition. Perfume became a form of invisible artistry, shaping how individuals were perceived and remembered. Technological advancements during the Renaissance enabled perfumery to reach new heights. The refinement of distillation equipment allowed for the extraction of more delicate and complex fragrances from flowers, herbs, and resins. Rosewater, orange blossom, and jasmine became more concentrated and longer-lasting, while exotic spices and animalic notes were incorporated to create nuanced, layered compositions. Perfumers experimented with solvents such as alcohol, enhancing the diffusion and stability of scents. The combination of empirical experimentation, artistic sensibility, and alchemical knowledge led to a golden age of aromatic innovation, where perfumes became increasingly sophisticated and coveted. The Renaissance also witnessed the rise of perfume as a social instrument. Courts and salons became spaces where fragrance was integral to etiquette, influence, and allure. Women and men of the elite used scent to captivate attention, assert authority, and negotiate social standing. Perfumed gloves, handkerchiefs, hair oils, and chambers became markers of refinement, subtly communicating wealth, taste, and sophistication. Scent was an invisible but potent tool in diplomacy, romance, and courtly intrigue. In this era, perfume evolved from a sensory indulgence into a strategic medium, capable of shaping perception and asserting presence. Trade networks expanded dramatically during the Renaissance, creating unprecedented access to exotic ingredients. The discovery of new trade routes and the establishment of colonial outposts brought spices, resins, and aromatic woods from distant lands directly into European markets. India, the Spice Islands, Africa, and the Americas supplied raw materials that were both rare and highly valued. Perfumers experimented with these exotic resources, blending them with traditional European botanicals to create novel compositions. This globalization of fragrance not only enriched the sensory repertoire of perfumery, but also laid the foundations for the modern, globally interconnected perfume industry. The Renaissance also emphasized the importance of education and knowledge in perfumery. Manuals, treatises, and scholarly writings documented recipes, techniques, and philosophies surrounding fragrance. Apothecaries and perfumers shared insights into distillation, infusion, and blending, passing knowledge from one generation to the next. This codification of expertise elevated perfumery from an artisanal craft to a professional discipline. Workshops and laboratories became centers of innovation, where science, art, and commerce intersected, producing perfumes that were both technically precise and aesthetically complex. Perfume's role in fashion and personal grooming became increasingly pronounced during this period. The Renaissance obsession with cleanliness, appearance, and sensory refinement drove demand for scented oils, powders, and water. Bathing, which had once been sporadic or ritualized, became a more regular practice among the elite, often accompanied by the use of aromatic oils and perfumes. Hair, skin, and clothing were infused with fragrance, creating a multi-sensory identity that reflected personal taste and social standing. Perfume became inseparable from the cultivated image of refinement, reinforcing its status as a marker of civilization and sophistication. The influence of perfume extended to art, literature, and culture. Writers, poets, and philosophers referenced fragrance as a symbol of virtue, beauty, and desire. Gardens, painted tapestries, and decorative objects often depicted aromatic flowers, emphasizing the centrality of scent in Renaissance aesthetics. The cultivation of aromatic plants became both practical and artistic, with garden design intended to enhance olfactory experience. This integration of fragrance into culture reinforced its status as a multidimensional form of luxury and expression, connecting sensory pleasure to intellectual and artistic achievement. By the 17th and 18th centuries, perfume had become firmly entrenched in European elite culture, particularly in France. The French court at Versailles epitomized the use of fragrance as a marker of power and prestige. Perfumes were employed not only on the body, but throughout courtly spaces, on fabrics, furniture, and even in fountains, to create an immersive sensory environment. Royal perfumers were highly esteemed, with access to the finest ingredients and the ability to influence fashion and taste across the continent. The codification of French perfumery techniques, including alcohol-based extraction and layered compositions, set standards that continue to influence the modern industry. Colonial expansion further fueled the growth of perfumery. European empires established plantations and trade routes for exotic plants and spices, ensuring a steady supply of raw materials for fragrance production. India, Southeast Asia, and the Americas became sources of aromatic woods, flowers, and resins, while Africa contributed essential oils and other botanical ingredients. This influx of materials enabled perfumers to experiment with new combinations, creating scents that were both luxurious and innovative. Global trade became an integral component of the perfume industry, linking commerce, exploration, and cultural exchange. The Industrial Revolution brought additional transformation to perfumery. In chemistry allowed for the synthesis of aromatic compounds, enabling perfumers to replicate and enhance natural scents. Synthetic ingredients such as vanillin, coumarin, and synthetic musks expanded the creative possibilities of fragrance, reducing reliance on rare and expensive natural materials. Upon her marriage to King Henry II of France, she transformed courtly life with scents that were both decorative and symbolic. Her personal collection included oils, waters, and ointments infused with rose, lavender, and exotic spices, marking a decisive moment in the elevation of perfume from private indulgence to a central feature of European aristocratic culture. Catherine's influence demonstrated how personal preference, political power, and fragrance intertwined, shaping taste and societal norms across the continent. Venice, during the Renaissance, emerged as a key hub for the perfume trade. Its strategic position allowed it to import rare and exotic ingredients from the East, including sandalwood from India, ambergris from the Persian Gulf, and precious resins from Arabia. Venetian perfumers, known as Perfumery, became celebrated artisans, combining European floral oils with imported spices to craft unique and sophisticated fragrances. The city's elaborate glassware, produced on the nearby island of Murano, became the preferred vessel for storing these precious scents, demonstrating the marriage of functionality, artistry, and luxury. Venetian perfumers also codified techniques of distillation and infusion, transmitting knowledge to other European regions and creating the foundation for the modern perfume industry. The French court, particularly under Louis XIV, the Sun King, cemented perfume status as a symbol of luxury, power, and refinement. Versailles became a spectacle of scent, with perfumed gloves, handkerchiefs, and salons filled with aromatic smoke. Royal perfumers such as Jean-Louis Fargin and François Coty, later in the 20th century, would build reputations on their ability to create fragrances that encapsulated the opulence of court life. The court's obsession with scent influenced fashion, social etiquette, and even diplomacy, with visitors judged by their olfactory presentation. This environment fostered the development of complex, layered perfumes, blending flowers, spices, resins, and animalic notes in intricate compositions that would define French perfumery for centuries. Trade during the Renaissance was vital to the expansion of perfumery. Spices, resins, and flowers traveled along extensive trade networks, linking Europe with Asia, Africa, and the Americas. The spice trade brought cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, The resin trade supplied frankincense, myrrh, and benzoin, and floral cultivation in Mediterranean climates provided roses, jasmine, and orange blossoms. The availability of these materials allowed perfumers to experiment with increasingly complex blends, producing scents that were both rare and highly coveted. This globalization of fragrance not only enhanced olfactory experiences, but also established perfume as a marker of cultural knowledge, sophistication, and cosmopolitan taste. The scientific exploration of fragrance advanced significantly during this period. Renaissance chemists and alchemists refined distillation, maceration, and extraction techniques, enabling the creation of more concentrated and enduring perfumes. Alcohol began to be used as a solvent, improving both the intensity and longevity of scent. Innovations such as the alembic still allowed perfumers to isolate the most delicate aromas, capturing the essence of flowers and herbs with unprecedented precision. This melding of science and artistry elevated perfumery, transforming it from simple floral or resin-based mixtures into complex, layered compositions that could convey emotion, social status, and artistic sensibility. Perfume also became a crucial component of personal grooming and fashion. Bathing practices evolved, particularly among the elite, and were often accompanied by the application of scented oils, waters, and powders. Hair, skin, and clothing were infused with fragrance, creating a multisensory expression of individuality and social standing. Handkerchiefs, fans, gloves, and embroidered linens were scented, enabling individuals to carry their chosen fragrance as an extension of their personal identity. The act of perfuming became ritualized, requiring knowledge of seasonality, ingredients, and social context, underscoring the sophisticated cultural role of scent during the Renaissance. The role of women in the evolution of perfume cannot be understated. Noblewomen and queens were not only patrons but also trendsetters in fragrance, dictating olfactory fashion through personal taste and social influence. Perfume became a means of asserting autonomy, charm, and social presence. Women commissioned custom blends, collaborated with perfumers to craft unique scents, and curated collections that reflected both individual preference and social sophistication. The intersection of gender, fragrance, and social positioning created an intricate culture of scent that influenced broader society, shaping the way perfume was perceived and utilized for centuries to come. In addition to personal use, perfume found applications in public and ceremonial life. Religious rituals, state ceremonies, and public entertainments employed scents to convey symbolism, sanctity, and grandeur. Cathedrals were filled with incense during Mass, while courts perfumed halls and gardens for festivities and diplomatic receptions. The presence of fragrance was not only aesthetic but also functional, masking odors, influencing mood, and reinforcing the status of those in attendance. This multifaceted use of scent exemplifies the Renaissance understanding of fragrance as both an art form and a tool of social architecture. The development of professional perfumers and guilds further formalized the industry. Workshops emerged as centers of learning, where apprentices were trained in the complex techniques of distillation, blending, and aromatic artistry. Recipes were meticulously documented, and secret formulas were guarded as trade secrets, reflecting the economic and cultural value of perfume. These early professional structures established a continuity of expertise, ensuring that knowledge of fragrance creation was transmitted across generations and adapted to the changing tastes of society. The professionalization of perfumery laid the groundwork for the structured global industry that exists today. Perfume's influence extended to literature, art, and philosophy. Writers such as Shakespeare, Montaigne, and later Proust referenced scent to convey memory, emotion, and social nuance. Art depicted fragrant gardens, aromatic vessels, and ritualized ceremonies, highlighting the integration of scent into aesthetic and cultural expression. The interplay of fragrance with visual and literary culture reinforced its role as a multidimensional art form. bridging sensory experience with intellectual and emotional resonance. Perfume became not only an indulgence, but also a means of storytelling and cultural codification. The Industrial Revolution catalyzed the transition from artisanal perfume to a modern, scalable industry. Advances in chemistry enabled the synthesis of aromatic compounds, allowing perfumers to replicate rare scents and create entirely new fragrances. Synthetic vanillin, calmarin, and musks expanded creative possibilities, reducing dependence on scarce natural resources. Mass production made perfumes more accessible, while branding and marketing transformed fragrance into a symbol of personal identity and aspiration. Iconic perfume houses such as Guerlain, Chanel, and Dior emerged, combining tradition, artistry, and modern industrial techniques to establish global influence. Advertising and media played a key role in the modern perfume industry. Perfume was promoted not merely as a product, but as an experience, a lifestyle, and an extension of personal identity. Elegant packaging, celebrity endorsements, and evocative narratives positioned fragrance as a means of social signaling and self-expression. Consumers were invited to engage with perfume emotionally and culturally, choosing scents that reflected mood, status, and aesthetic preference. This fusion of commerce, artistry, and personal engagement transformed perfume into a global phenomenon, spanning luxury markets, mass consumer goods, and niche artisanal creations. Today, the perfume industry is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise built upon centuries of cultural, technological, and artistic development. From Renaissance experimentation to modern branding, the evolution of fragrance reflects the intersection of human creativity, scientific innovation, and social aspiration. Global supply chains link growers, chemists, perfumers, designers, and marketers, creating an industry that is both vast and intricately interconnected. Modern consumers have access to an unparalleled diversity of scents, from natural botanical extracts to synthetic innovations, reflecting the legacy of centuries of experimentation, trade, and aesthetic cultivation. The evolution from Renaissance luxury to contemporary perfumery also demonstrates the enduring cultural significance of scent. Perfume functions as a medium of personal identity, social expression, and emotional resonance. It bridges history, geography, and sensory experience, connecting individuals to traditions, innovations, and aesthetic ideals that span centuries. The billion-dollar industry we know today is more than commerce. It is a manifestation of human fascination with fragrance, creativity, and the desire to communicate through the invisible, ephemeral power of scent. In summary, the journey from Renaissance luxury to modern perfumery illustrates the remarkable transformation of fragrance from a symbol of elite indulgence to a global cultural and economic phenomenon. Advances in distillation, blending, and synthetic chemistry enabled perfumers to expand their creative horizons, while the rise of branding and marketing brought scent into everyday life and personal expression. Trade, innovation, and artistry combine to create an industry that is both historically grounded and dynamically modern. Perfume continues to captivate, enchant, and inspire, demonstrating the timeless human desire to engage the senses, evoke emotion, and craft beauty from the natural and the imagined.